Before we get started, I know what you're thinking. Why is my Christmas tree still up? I should have taken it down a month ago. Yep. No, in all seriousness, my roommate has apparently decided to celebrate Christmas all year round. I would take it down myself, but I'm not in the best condition to do so. Recently retore my rotator cuff. But I figure as long as it's here, at least it'll make a nice little background for the video, and anyone watching this in the future won't know that I waited until February to record this. Wait. Today we're going to be talking about ending books in the middle of a series. As you know, I've already made 2 videos on the subjects on how to end your book. But when you're ending a book that's in the middle of a series, it's a whole different beast. Yeah, the quote-unquote formula is still the same, but there are a lot of nuances that you need to keep in mind when ending books that are in the middle of a series. As I'm sure you know, how you end your books in the middle of a series is critically important. It is commonly said that the first chapter of your book will sell your readers on the rest of the book. However, the last chapter sells your readers on the next book. So today we're going to be talking about a bunch of different ways to end your books that are in the middle of a series to keep your readers coming back for the next one. Let's get started. Number 1, do not skip the resolution. It is very tempting to end your book right after the climax with no resolution whatsoever. And if you think about it, it seems logical. End on a powerful note that will keep your readers going into the next book. However, you do still need to treat every single book like a standalone book and give it its own individual climax and resolution. The resolution ties up that individual book and makes it its own story. Without it, you don't really give the reader a chance to breathe before moving on to the next one. It's exhausting, even if you did write a very powerful climax, and especially if you wrote a very powerful climax. You need a resolution. Next up, don't resolve everything. If you resolve all of your plot lines, all of your characters, you leave nothing for the reader to come back to. You give them no reason to keep reading. You do need to tie up some individual plot lines in each story, but you do need to leave enough open to give the reader a reason to come back. You need to leave the overarching plot open. Some mistakes that I see authors make a lot is they get rid of the bad guy in one story and they have a whole new bad guy for the next one, and then they get rid of him and then a whole new bad guy for the next one. Obviously this works in some genres like mysteries where it's a different bad guy each book. That's fine. But in an overarching plot, if the villain dies at the end of book 1, it's just one more reason for the reader not to come back for book 2. There are tons of examples for this specific point, but I'm sure you get the idea. Don't tie everything up. Next up, cliffhangers are your friend, but use them wisely. Cliffhangers are like books that end with a climax and no resolution. It gets exhausting. Sure, it's fun in the moment, but when all you write are cliffhangers, it can get pretty exhausting. To be completely transparent, I'd say that's one of my weaknesses. My fiction is very fast-paced and intentionally so, and I'm really good at ending each chapter in each book in such a way that compels the reader to move forward, but that's often by using a cliffhanger, and you do need to be really careful when using these cliffhangers. Because if you don't do it right, it's exhausting, and readers remember that. There will inevitably be another video on cliffhangers coming up, but if I could sum up what makes a good cliffhanger right now, it's one that makes sense in the narrative of the story, one that doesn't completely come out of left field, one that compels the reader to move forward without draining their mental and emotional faculties. Next up is a quick hack that will keep your readers moving on to the next book in your series, but first, if you haven't already subscribed, please do so. There's tons of useful writing advice on this channel every single week that will help you be a better writer. So be sure to click the subscribe button and then the bell next to it so you can be notified of every single video. With that, a quick and easy hack that will keep your readers moving on to the next book is to include the first chapter of the next book. If the reader finishes your book and then realizes that you've included the first chapter of the next book, chances are, if they even remotely liked the book, they'll keep reading just to find out what happens next. And if you throw in the first chapter of your next book and make sure it ends on a punchy cliffhanger that will make your readers go and get the book, you will dramatically increase the read-through rate of your series. Now, for those of you who have read my books, you know that I do not currently employ this method, and there are tons of reasons why I haven't done it yet, but I will do it as soon as possible because it does help that much. Next up, make sure the end of each book is satisfying. And I don't just mean making sure the reader feels good after reading it, or making sure that you include a resolution, which you should do, but say you're writing a series about a war. It would make sense that in this war, individual battles are fought, progress is gained or lost. And if you end your book with no significant progress in one direction or another, readers will wonder why they even read the book. It will almost seem like there was no point to it at all. There does need to be a sense of progression. I feel like this is an obvious point, and I'm sure a lot of you are thinking that right now, but for the sake of thoroughness, I had to say something. Next up, position your characters for the plot of the next book. This goes hand in hand with leaving plot lines open or villains alive. You need to make sure that the reader walks away from book 1 having a pretty good idea of what's going to happen in book 2. Of course, when you get to the next book, it is my opinion that you should pull the rug out from underneath the reader and give them something they were not expecting. That's just good subversion of expectation. However, ending your book giving the reader an expectation of what's to come does two things. One, subconsciously in the back of their mind, they know there is a point to all this. You are going somewhere with the story. You have a plan. And then two, if the plotline that you're teasing is exciting enough, they'll buy the next book for that plotline alone. So make sure you end each book giving the reader some idea of what's to come. Next up, for those of you who are writing a book but don't know whether you want to write a sequel, the best advice I can give you is shut the door, but leave open a window. This is where you write the story like a standalone story. It begins and ends, but you leave the possibility open for a sequel. This works particularly well if you like an idea and you write a book for it, and then you release it and then test the waters. See if people like it. If you don't get the response you were going for, that's great, you wrote a standalone book with no expectations of a sequel. But if by some miracle the book blows up, you have a plotline to return to. You can write more. And from a business point of view, you should write more. And then finally, throughout your series, make sure you vary these techniques. I personally wouldn't recommend ending every single book on a cliffhanger. And I wouldn't end every single book in a very resolved way that leaves a sliver of a plotline open. For instance, in my series The Light Thief, I did tell you that I rely a lot on cliffhangers, but I end my books in different ways. The first book ends with a very satisfying ending, yet it's clear that there's still more story out there. The second book ends with a major cliffhanger, and then the third book ties just about everything up. However, I did leave just enough open at the end of that third book so that when it was well received, I had another story ready to go. But with that, that is going to do it for this video on ending books in the middle of a series. Thank you again for watching. My name is David Webb, and get some writing done.